welcome to the conversation on this, the 27th of February. My name is Blaise Bryant. We have quite the show lined up for you today. We have in studio right now Derek Gokey, who is in the cast of Albany's production of Spring Awakening, and that starts up tonight at 7, and it is great to have Derek here in the studio. Thanks so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. So, how did you end up involved in Spring Awakening?
I ended up involved when I saw that they were going to be, putting the show on. And this is a show that I've wanted to do since, I'll say, like junior year of high school. It's been about 5 years now, and as soon as I saw that auditions flyer, I was like, oh man, I've really got to get myself down to there and try out.
So, what about Spring Awakening intrigued you to grab that audition flyer and go down to the office and try out?
Well, I think I really was attracted to the fact that it was a bunch of teenagers singing in a rock style fashion about all these different ideas and issues that teenagers go through. There's a song, I'm not sure if I can mention the title or not, but it's called of the Living, and it's literally just we're on stage, we're jumping around. It's almost like we're throwing a temper tantrum of, just frustrated because, none of us have really experienced sex, and we're really only experiencing sex through masturbation. One of the lines, God, is this it? This can't be it. And, really discovering ourselves and our bodies.
Right, and that song, I think, was probably written with that play in mind, because this play is exactly that, and it was written in Germany just before 1900.
Yep, 1891, and it actually ended up getting banned in Germany for a while. It got banned because of how controversial some of these issues were. It's not just discussing sexuality, but it's discussing abortion, child abuse, rape, and all these other really sensitive topics that, obviously, early 1900s, or sorry, late 1900s,
late 1800s, early 1900s, and those were topics that, back then were cringing, but now are very topical today.
Mm-hmm.
And no one, bats an eyelash when they hear about this sort of stuff. So, when you auditioned, take us through what the process was for you.
Sure. I had to sign up on the call board, which the call board was just littered with names. The amount of people that were trying out for this show was absolutely insane. I was really surprised because, usually when I mention Spring Awakening to someone, they go, oh, Spring Awakening, what's that? And I go, you don't know Spring Awakening? It was on Broadway for a year. It has 8 Tony Awards. Like, this is a huge show. And then all of a sudden I get to call boards and I'm like, oh, these are all the people who know what Spring Awakening is and really want to be in the show.
How many people were there?
When I tried out, there was at least, I want to say like 30 people in the back room waiting at the time, and this audition process ran from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night, and they were constantly filtering people through. And this was over the course of, I believe, 3 days, 3 auditioning days. Maybe there was larger traffic because I was in there on the last day of auditions, but still, I was really surprised. But I'm really pleased with the cast, and everything turned out well. We have a lot of great voices in the show. As far as if you want me to walk you through more of the audition process, I went in and, at first they just hand you the script. You say, hey, go run some lines, try to, let's see what you can do. And then we also had to have a vocal solo prepared that we could either sing a cappella or we could bring in sheet music, and they had a piano accompanist. And we came out and we sat in front of the director, the 2 assistant stage managers, and we sang the piece. we were singer pieces, which was pretty nerve-wracking. And then once that was all through, we learned a song from the show. We each had different songs we were learning. Mine was Don't Do Sadness, which, in my opinion, is one of the most fantastic songs in the show. And I enjoyed it, rocked out to it, and I landed the part of Ernst in the show.
And Ernst, he is a character that, along with Hanschen, discovered that he is a homosexual throughout the play, right?
Yep. Ernst, his character in particular is, he is very heavily invested in religion. And, it's the same as, what teenagers will go through today as far as, oh man, peer pressure. Ernst has kind of turned to God in a way of, okay, I know this isn't right. I can't accept this part of who I am. And so he really tries to hide who he is. But Hanschen, he's a character he just kind of sits back and goes with the flow and just takes what he can get without pushing people, too far. But he's very much the dominator in the relationships. He likes to control people, to manipulate them, and to use them. And he uses them for his own benefit. And Hanschen is not completely gay. He's actually bi. He takes it upon himself to try to seduce Ernst for his own pleasure because he sees that Ernst is so in love with him. And he completely takes advantage of Ernst.
And how does Ernst deal with that?
Ernst deals with it as, maybe there's hope. Maybe there's a way, oh my God, I can be who I am. And he's just so excited in the moment of just, I can finally, kind of just show who I am. He's so taken in by Hanschen's words of just finally being able to release what he truly is. And there's definitely a part of him that realizes he's being used, but even though he's being used, he's just been repressed for so long and just wants to explore it. He's going to go along with the ride even though he knows he's going to get hurt by this, or that there's a possibility he's going to get hurt.
Okay, and without giving too much away, because you want people to go see the performance, what happens?
All right.
Or was that giving too much away?
I don't think that's giving too much away. I think people will be pleasantly surprised. There's a lot of different storylines throughout the play. The relationship between Ernst and Hanschen is only one of the relationships. Would you like me to try to give you a brief overview of what the relationships are?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the main relationship takes place between Vendla and Melchior. And Melchior is a character who is kind of like a cut above the rest in that he knows more than they do because he reads a lot of books and he reads a lot of adult literature. So, in a way, he's far advanced beyond what the others know. And then there's Vendla, who ends up being his love interest, who has absolutely no idea what happens between a relationship between a man and a woman.
Right, because she's 14 at the beginning of the play, right?
And the beginning of the play addresses that with saying, what is this? And she tries to get an answer out of her mom, but her mom never really gives her a clear answer. And without giving too much away, she ends up facing a lot of consequences because she just doesn't know what it means or what it is.
And those consequences are not positive.
Oh, not at all. No. And I feel like if I was to say too much, I'd give away the show, and I would like people to be pleasantly surprised about it.
Indeed, for sure. If people are looking up, seeing, when Spring Awakening is on the campus, and they realize that, okay, tickets, considering we are college students, are a little bit expensive, $18. However, I don't necessarily want to say the end justifies the means, but SUNY Albany put a lot of money into this production.
Oh yeah, I that was actually one of my concerns when I first heard the ticket price. I'm like, whoa, is that seriously how much the show is going to cost? $18 for students, $20 for adults. That just seems a little ludicrous for me, especially for on a college campus, where you'd expect most of the audience to be college students, and college students don't have a lot of revenue, like you said, or they're more worried about spending it elsewhere. And then I started really talking to the director and some of the older. We have two older cast members with us, Carol and Patrick, who are absolutely phenomenal and have been doing plays for years. And I said, well, $18. I was like, how do you feel about that? And their reply was that a lot of the professional performances in the area, you go down to Capitol Rep or anything like that, they're charging $30, $35 a ticket.
Yeah.
So and that's for a professional live theater, whereas what we're putting on here is it's professional live theater. We've put a lot of time into it, put in a lot of effort, and I would definitely say that we are on the same level. And then I started talking to Chad about the production budget for the show, and I said, well okay, what else? Where are we spending a lot of money? And we spent over $40,000 on lighting alone, and then another $12,000 on new microphones, and I was just like, whoa. That's
$52,000.
That's a lot of money to just put in for this show out of nowhere. And in total, the way Chad was saying it is that this is the biggest production that our theater has put on, as far as it's got more lights, it's got more sound, and it's going to be one amped up rock show. The only thing we're missing is the pyrotechnics. Pyrotechnics, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think he said somewhere upwards of 400 lights are being used in the show. We have a lot of intelligent moving lights. We actually have this giant, almost screen up to the top left-hand corner of the stage. It's going to be on a tree. You'll see it if you go, but different video packages are being played while actors are on stage singing, and like I said, the sound system is so improved and just sounds so fantastic. Hopefully you feel like you're going to see not necessarily a musical, but a rock musical. This powerful feeling of, that feeling when you go to a rock concert and you're up in the mosh pit jumping up and down. And,
oh, yeah.
And something Chad has done is Chad has done a lot of theater throughout his life. He's seen a lot of Broadway performances and he's directed a lot of musical/plays. And what he's done is he's actually put seating on the wings of the stage itself.
Wow.
And for $15, you can actually sit on the very sides of the stage and be, 4 or 5 feet away from the actors, literally sitting on stage. All the lights are going on around you, and you'll see actors, run past you to get on stage, and you get a lot closer and different experience. It's a completely different experience when you're sitting on the stage right next to the actors versus in the audience.
Right.
Now,
I have about 90 seconds. How much time did you guys put in as a group?
Hours upon hours. At least, I want to say like 3 weeks solid of, solid time. Honestly, probably even more than that. I think I'm under-exaggerating. We spent roughly 5-6 hours every day, Monday through Saturday. and then we'd usually have Sunday off, and then.
And that was for a few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is happening the next 2 weekends, right?
Yep, this has happened the next 2 weekends.
So Thursday through Sunday, starting tonight, and it's happening. Where's the theater at there?
It's right in the pack, at University at Albany campus.
Okay.
You can't miss it. It'll be lit up in blue lights. If you park by Indian Quad, you should be able to find your way over to the pack, no problem.
And show starts when?
Show times vary from day to day. The weekends, I believe it starts at 2, and then on weekdays, it starts at 7. The best place to check that out is right at University Albany website. You can go to the theater department, or it'll be listed right up front.
All right. Derek Gokey is a cast member of the musical Spring Awakening, SUNY Albany Style. It is also a Tony nominated or Tony Award winning and Broadway musical. Derek, I want to thank you so much for coming in and taking the time, and I greatly appreciate it, and the show must go on, my friend.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And in 15 seconds, indeed, the conversation, will go on with Times Union sports editor Pete Iorizzo with a recap of the Olympics. Welcome back to the conversation on this, the 27th of February. The second half of the show is Pete Iorizzo and I talking about the Olympics. And Pete is the sports editor for the Times Union, and it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time, Pete. Very much appreciate it.
Sure, no problem, anytime.
Thank you. And so the big story that came out of the Olympics was the hockey with both the men's and the women's.
Yeah, the women's game in particular, I thought was probably maybe the wildest, most entertaining finish to a hockey game I think I've ever seen. Which I guess is kind of funny because the men's team, on the other hand, just sort of fizzled out after such a great game against Russia early on in the tournament. In fact, I would say probably T.J. Oshie's goal or goals against the Russians, as it were, probably one of the highlights of the entire Olympics, at least as far as the Americans were concerned. Probably not a lot of people had heard of him beforehand, even though he is an NHL player. But certainly, I think almost everybody has now.
For sure, and I remember reading Facebook and Twitter, and there were posts. Of course, people were joking, saying T.J. Oshie could run for president 2016.
Yeah, well, he's about as popular as he's ever going to be, probably. So why not?
Well, at least he did it on one of the biggest stages, and that's not to take anything away from the team he plays for, the St. Louis Blues. But I mean, it's just really not a prominent hockey town, and for that matter, a hockey stage.
Well, and I mean, he's a fourth line player in the NHL too, who's on the U.S. team because he's particularly good in shootouts, and I guess they felt like if it ever were to come down to a shootout, it'd be worth having him on the roster just for that moment. So I mean, I guess you'd have to say he certainly delivered, considering that was the biggest reason why he was there.
Yeah, 4 for 6, not too bad at all. And we'll go through now the speed skating with White and Davis, their chemistry being together for 17 years, it paid off.
Yeah, and it was kind of fun to hear about their whole backstory because probably like a lot of Americans, I didn't know it that they had been together for 17 years, and just hearing about the all the chemistry that needs to be developed to be a successful figure skating pair, and hearing about starting off as sort of awkward kids and preteens, and then turning into this into a figure skating couple that could do such amazing things on the ice. It was pretty cool to hear the story behind the story there.
Absolutely. I mean, even though everyone is awkward in their preteens, but that's, beside the point.
Yeah, particularly in figure skating, I think.
Take me through a little bit more in terms of the backstory with them.
Well, I mean, there's probably people who could tell you a lot more about it than I could, but just the part that got me was just just the amount of time it takes to develop that kind of chemistry. I think I read that they got started when they were 8-9 years old, and it just going through those routines day after day after day. Geez, I find myself when I'm watching it thinking, how do they how do they remember it all? I can only imagine how many hours of training it takes for that to become second nature, like it does.
For sure, and we'll move on now to the slalom. I think it's safe to say, Pete, that Bodie Miller has passed on the baton to Ted Ligety.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a fair thing to say, and I think there was probably some anticipation that was going to happen. I think Ligety was being sort of marketed as one of the potential stars of these games, even before they got started. I can think of a handful of commercials he was in, which when we start marketing these men and women, before the game, sort of like Noel Pikus Pace was the skeleton slider, and probably a few others I'm leaving out. That's usually a pretty good tip off as to who's got the best chances to win.
For sure. Noel didn't have a bad Olympics at all. Was it a silver?
No, not at all. Yeah, silver, and that was a pretty neat story too. Is someone who's been touring the world with her entire family, and coming back from injury. That was a great story.
I mean, as someone who has had family growing up around the winter sports scene up in Lake Placid, there was talk several years ago that I remember that her career very well could have ended because of so many decimating leg injuries.
Yeah, I remember. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago now when she was hit by a bobsled, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think broke maybe one or even both of her legs. And it is quite a story of perseverance.
I mean, the adversity that she has had to overcome is really something in and of itself to be proud of. I mean, certainly the medal is just proof of that, but to be able to come back on the Olympic stage after all that is impressive in and of itself. We'll stick with the sliding sports, and let's talk about the Remsen native, just outside of Utica, Erin Hamlin, making history for USA Women's Luge.
Yeah, my favorite part of following that story was online at the newspapers out in Syracuse and Utica. It looked like they both had photographers and video cameras and writers at her. I think it was her elementary school, where all the kids were, following it on TV and rooting her on. And it was neat to see her whole hometown getting behind her there as she made history, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, the first ever women's luger to win a medal, and a significant improvement from the Vancouver Olympics, where she finished 11th 4 years ago, to finishing third just a couple of weeks ago in Sochi.
Yeah, it's terrific. A great story too. It's always fun for me when you hear these stories of folks at the Olympics who come from small towns like that, and then you see this this small town and here's sort of the hometown hero performing on the biggest world stage that there is. I always enjoy those are the kind of moments that probably make the Olympics the event that it is.
For sure. Now we'll move on to snowboarding. Shaun White, where do you see his future holding up? I know that the course over in Sochi, because it was so warm, was not the greatest.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Shaun White is that he's still so tremendously popular among teenagers today and younger generations. I know you read a lot about about him before the snowboarding events and how it doesn't sound like he's the most well-liked guy among his competitors. But I saw one study after the Olympics point out that I think it was Facebook's own study said that he was the most talked about Olympian on the social network throughout the Olympics, which speaks to sort of his power as a brand. And I'm not sure that's how much that's going to be diminished now after his performance in Sochi.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and even the women, for that matter, we had 2 spots in the top 3.
Yeah, and I think he's probably in snowboarding. You saw a few new stars being born in some ways. Maybe not so much Americans, but around the world.
And I was actually pretty surprised looking at the medal count, how many medals the Americans got. They took second overall, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
26 or 7, which is pretty impressive.
It is, and it's funny because one of the storylines that you heard during the Olympics was that the Americans were not performing up to expectations. At the end of the day, the medal count still ended up being pretty impressive. I think probably it was more so that some of the more prominent Americans, maybe who we thought, like Shaun White, for instance, who we thought might sort of emerge as the stars for the Olympics, and the speed skaters too, for that matter. That didn't necessarily pan out, but there were certainly plenty of medals to go around.
For sure, and 2 of those medals came from the bobsled teams, which did very well on what was considered to be a very tricky track.
Yeah, well, they would all be very tricky to me if I were going down that thing at 80 miles an hour. But yeah, and it was pretty neat. Steve Holcomb was actually here in Albany the other day on his way back from Sochi, flying back to Albany Airport. So one of our photographers was out there getting a nice picture of him with his 2 bronze medals. He spends a lot of his time training in Lake Placid, so I assume that's where he was on his way back to. Probably.
Then again, of course, the worst thing in the world we can do as people who cover stuff is speculate.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a pretty safe assumption, though.
Your favorite aspect of the Olympics this year?
I'd probably go back to I guess I had my 2 favorite moments. One were not even so much watching the luge itself, but just watching the town of Remsen rooting for Aaron Hamlin. That was a lot of fun, and certainly the end of the U.S. women's hockey game was just obviously putting aside the fact that we're all rooting for the Americans, and it's heartbreaking in the one sense to see them lose a game that way. But I think anybody who enjoys the Olympics or is a hockey fan had to appreciate just what a marvelous game that was.
For sure. Pete Iorizzo is the sports editor of the Albany Times Union, and he's been on the show before. And Pete, I'd love to have you on again sometime, and thank you so much once again for taking the time. I very much appreciate it.
Sure thing, anytime.
You bet. And this has been the conversation on this, the 27th of February. My name is Blaise Bryant. To listen to the show, go to tuneintoradiostros.weebly.com and facebook.com/Radio ST Rose Conversation to listen to this show as well as past shows. We are off next week, and my body feels like it's on the critical battery alert, so in 2 weeks I should be nice and recharged for the conversation.